So this is kind of a last second video I decided I wanted to do, where I kind of wanted to do a post-mortem on overarching all of set 3. What my thoughts of set 3 were. I wanted to do it now rather than later because next week I'll probably do a video on set 4. So wanted to finish up all of set 3 before we moved on to set 4. So we'll go through each of the origins and kind of give thoughts onto like what was good about it, what was bad about it, what changed throughout time, and kind of start off from there. I'm going to kind of skip before set 3.5 because I think I did a post-mortem on that. So we'll start at set 3.5, and so this will be mostly on set 3.5. Set 3.5. Just want to say it a few more times. All right, so going through the origins, Astro. So Astro was... What was interesting about Astro was a build I thought would get more builds. The problem was it didn't. It was very specifically Astro snipers. The only carry within here was Teemo. So you were always going to run Teemo, which means you had to run snipers. After that, it was just pick and choose what you can play to get Astro online. I think had there been another carry in here, we might have seen some more flexibility in the Astro's composition. So I think in the future we won't see these need 3 units and 4 you have 4 units, pick 3 to choose from to get the synergy. So I think had Astro had another unit, it probably would have been fine. Battlecast never did anything. They either did a roll on Battlecast to get up to some of the absurdity of Battlecast 6 and Battlecast 8, but it was really only helpful in the early game and didn't scale well late game because these were straight numbers, and that's clear fact in the game. Anything that is a straight numerical value of healing or damage increase, it won't scale into the end game. Celestial kind of at its time. Well, Celestial really only gets played now. I don't recall it getting much play early outside of flexing to Celestial in like preset 3.5. Right now, it's pretty much only played in Protector compositions where you have Rakan and Xin Zhao. Obviously, because they're both Protectors, and they were both Celestials. So that was really the only time you were going to see them. Where it was really useful was pretty much just snipers. The Celestial proc itself was useful in snipers. But that's about it. Chrono was the flex of the game. It was just, you flexed it into your composition in order to get the Chrono boost. These numbers were tinkered with throughout the set because everyone was just playing 2 and nobody was playing more than 2. Cybernetic, so throughout all of set 3, including before set 3.5, Cybernetic was a build. Now, pre-set 3.5, we didn't have Vayne. So our carry choices were Lucian, who was not a good carry, Aurelia, who was an inconsistent carry, and Echo, who was perpetually AFK for that guy trying to get 6 Cybers online. So when they put in another actual carry, it made Cybers much more viable at composition rather than kind of a risky composition to play. Because if preset 3.5, if multiple people were playing Cybers, you were all fighting over Echo. Now you can have 2 or 3 people playing Cyber in a lobby, and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. So having 7 units when you needed 6 worked out really well, especially when you had a secondary carry in Vayne. They tried to make Lucian a carry, but he really wasn't a carry except in like the early game when you had a red buff with another blaster, or you had a Luden's Echo. Darkstar. So Darkstar was a comp that was good pre 3.5. The problem was it was good pre 3.5, but after 3.5 it was kind of just a low B tier comp. You could still play it, but it really wasn't that good. So, and I go back and I try to think about what changed with it. Well, the 2 things that changed was, 1 was any other champion dies, and 2, they made it from a 3-6 to a 2-4-6. So you only needed 2 units to proc the trait. Now the thing was, 2 units didn't do anything. So you almost always needed 4 units to have Darkstar trait actually be something viable to put in your composition. But I think what really happened with Darkstar and why it became a lesser comp was because in 3.5 there were just better comps. It was nice that this now scaled with spell power, but the only spell power champion within here was basically Xerath and the crazy people who ran more Kaiser carries, which I don't know if you tried it. It's really fun. So Darkstar got a bit weaker, but I don't think it was so much changes that Riot made as much as the meta pushing it out. It's probably kind of a hot take, but that's what I'm going to go with. Mech always saw play throughout the game. I think there was probably an early spat on 3.5 where people didn't play Mech, but otherwise we almost always saw Mech. Pre 3.5 it was always Mech Infiltrator. Post 3.5 it was just Mech madness. You just like flexed whatever you had into Mech and had a happy day go. So I'm overall quite happy with how Mech worked out. I think the only issue that I really had with Mech was some of these champions I think should have flexed to have a third trait, so that way they see more play. Now, that was my take early in the set, but as we moved on later into the set, I've kind of stepped back from that thought. Maybe Annie could have used the third trait, because she was Sorcerer, so you could have actually played her in the early game to keep Sorcerer on while having another trait that's viable. But what ended up happening later in the set was Rumble's Demolitionist and Fizz's ability of mass AoE while being an infiltrator, both of those became quite valuable. So you would often see these two seeing play. But Annie was kind of just played a little bit in the early game, which is unfortunate because Annie was a frontline sorcerer and there really weren't any in the game. So having her be more viable in the early game would have been to a really good advantage. It just didn't happen. Rebel always saw play throughout the game. It was just really tricky to balance these values, in my opinion. It was really easy to get these values to be something where Jinx just blew everyone out. I think where else I was happy with this was how Rebels fit into Blademaster, where when they added Zed, you could play Yasuo, Zed, and Master Yi, and just have a good time. I'm happy with where Rebel ended up, considering where it was pre-3.5, because pre-3.5 we had Sonya, and Sonya was annoying as shit. Sonya was one of the most annoying champions in the game, because we were just printing mana everywhere, and that was not fun to play against. So, I'm happy with where Rebel ended, and I wouldn't be upset to see this come out again. It kind of is, I think, in Keeper. I think Keeper is kind of like this. So I'm glad they're kind of keeping it. Space Pirate. I have a bone to pick with Space Pirate. Space Pirate's a good opener. The problem with Space Pirate is that if you rolled Space Pirate early game, and it was very successful for you, it was pretty easy to go into the mid game, take a few hits while you're trying to get up to 2-star GP. To find 2-star BG, level up your comp, get all the units you need to run Space Pirates, and once you got to that point, game was over. Like, beating a maxed out Space Pirates comp, straight up impossible. There is literally no way to do it. So long as they had a GA on their GP, there was nothing you could do. You lost. You could put whatever Mana Reave, whatever Zephyr you want on that GP. Probably the only way you were going to beat it is if you Zephyred GP. That was basically, in my opinion, the only way to beat Space Pirates. Shroud wasn't going to do it, because GA would just resurrect and they'd be fine, and then they'd kill you all. Shrug. I think with Space Pirate, it was way too easy to level up in the early game and just carry that through the late game. I literally just did a game of that where I was kind of like upset. I was like, I didn't do anything. I just ran Space Pirates early and high rolled my early game into a Space Pirates like stomp. So I'm kind of hoping that we don't see many champions like Gangplank again, because I think Gangplank and Darius, I think both those two. Darius, for another reason, I guess I'll get into that now. Darius was another champion I kind of had issues with. I kind of didn't like champions that were resetting their ults, where if their ults were going to insta-kill something, I didn't think there was a good reason for you to be resetting it to smash someone else in the face. I was more okay with Aurelia, because Aurelia didn't as often one-shot things and had mana reave, so it was kind of balanced in that way. Whereas Darius, people just put Jewel Gauntlet on him, and he just killed that. He just ran through your whole comp, and it was like, okay. Especially in like the early mid game, like it was a problem, and you could get a ton of gold off it. There was a problem here, in my opinion. I don't think set 4 is going to have this problem, but that said, I did like Darius and Jace's design. I think both of them actually had really nice designs. It was GP and Darius I had issues with. And the other thing with Darius was that he was never contested. Like, unless you had another person actually running Space Pirate, no one contested Darius because he didn't have another trait. Like, his trading is awful. He's Space Pirate Mana Reaver. I literally ran him with Mana Reaver once, ever. Star Guardian was kind of a roller coaster comp. There were sometimes it was the best comp in the game, like it is right now, and there was times when it was dog shit. There's really no other way to put it. It was a bad comp at times, and it was the best comp at times. Right now, where the comp is basically at is if you have 6-star Guardians with Janna, you play 6-star Guardians with Janna, and you laugh at people. Otherwise, Star Guardian overall, I think, had a lot of interesting champions in it, and that combined fairly well throughout the game. Ahri was probably the best early game carry ever in this game, at least when I play. Like, outside of maybe like a Predator hyper roll, Ahri was like the best thing that you could do in this game. And Nico became very good late game. Nico's issue was mana. Nico perpetually was a problem because of mana. Because she had the Protector trait, if you had a Protector in, and you got enough mana to make her hit, she would ult, get a shield that would allow her to get mana to ult again. So, I remember there was a patch where they had to tone down her, they had to up her total mana cost because she was unkillable for a lot of compositions. Syndra was interesting because Syndra was a carry that was like really bad in the early game. She just scaled super hard with blue buff and Seraphs, and without those items she wasn't very good. I think there was also some design issues with Syndra. I shouldn't say design issues, because the design was fine. I think there were some technical issues. The Star Guardian mirror is kind of wild, in that both players just put up their hands and what happens, happens. There's very little you can do positionally. It's pretty much all in items. Items determine the Star Guardian mirror. Ironically, if you don't have Hexblade, or Hextech Gunblade, you actually win that, I believe. I think that's how that works. The player with GA and not Hextech Gunblade wins that mirror. I believe that's how it works. So, which is ironic because usually the items that you put on are Gunblade. It's one of the first items you put on her because it gives her a lot of survivability. But in the mirror, it's a liability because her targeting priority targets high health champions. So if Syndra doesn't get touched, the opponent's Syndra is going to kill your Syndra. There was also a technical issue with her in her orbs. You could steal her. You could steal another Syndra's orbs. I don't know how that worked, but it made for a lot of weird engagements where it looked like you were supposed to win and then you just didn't. I think overall the biggest issue with Star Guardian was the Star Guardian mirror. I think they'll probably... We're not going to see something like that again because it was kind of something endemic to the composition and the way Syndra and Janna worked that I don't think we're going to see something like that again. Classes. Blademaster. Blademaster was hit or miss throughout the set. Sometimes we would... There was basically 2 Blademaster compositions. You would either run Shredder or you could run 6BM. I think this was preset 3.5. Back, Yasuo had a different targeting priority where he would target champions with the most items. Yasuo was way better then, and he was a much more useful champion back then. He is not a useful champion anymore. I really wish they would bring back his targeting priority because it was fun. It was a much more diverse build that you could make. You didn't have to run a Master Yi carry. You could run a Yasuo carry. You had a choice between these two. So my hope is that we see old Yasuo back sometime. The only other build you saw was Shredder. Shredder came to and fro throughout its lifetime, where sometimes it was... Earlier, Hyper Roll was one of the better ways to play the game. Between Candyland and Shredder, or the Caitlyn Hyper Roll, it was one of the better ways to play the game and to get wins. You would kind of carry your way through the mid game easily, and everyone was just too weak to beat you because you win streak too hard on them, and they never built up an economy or anything to challenge you. But later in the game, our 4-star and 5-star carries got a lot stronger, I think, and that kind of toned the Shredder build down a good bit. There were some reworks to try to fix this, in that they would try to buff Xayah, particularly like the 1-star and particularly the 2-star variant, because if you didn't hit Xayah 3, it sucks to be you. And the shivs, the static shiv buffs, also the Giant Slayer buffs, really. Those kind of made the build better, but the build still was kind of in a place where I don't think it was. Right now, I don't think it's that great. Blaster. Okay, Blaster. Let's be clear. 4 Blaster is garbage right now. Now, what you're thinking is, but pre 3.5, Blaster was great. Everyone ran 4 Blaster. You ran 4 Blaster so that way you would have Ezreal, Misfortune, and Jinx. So you already were at 3. Just throw in the 4th and be happy. I have a sneeze coming. Okay, I don't. Never mind. So Blaster 4 kind of became pretty useless when we got to this point, because there was no other 2 champions to run. You just ran Jinx and Ezreal. The other issue with these was that these targeted random things and triggered on hit effects. Why was this a problem? This was a problem because of red buff. Pretty much red buff. Also disarm, but mostly red buff because disarm is crap. This was the easiest way to win streak early in the game, was to make a red buff, have 2 blasters, red buff your entire opposing team, and just laugh because they were dead. This is why red buff is gone. Being able to open up these kind of traits without red buff kind of blowing everything out of the water is good for the game. So Blaster killed red buff. Also, Sivir killed red buff because Sivir was doing the same damn thing. Brawler. So Brawler is coming back next set. Brawler kind of faded as we went later. Part of it was because the 4-star carry isn't that good. Cho'Gath was good mostly because he was a stun. Gnar was good mostly because he had a stun. They weren't really good for their stats or anything in particular that they did outside the fact they had an AoE stun. And getting health buffs on them was, while it was okay, having to throw in 4 units, particularly when one of them had to be a 1-cost unit, that got rough. The one positive side of it was that V was a very good champion with a very good ult, and Blitzcrank is one of the best utility ults in the game. So it wasn't uncommon to have like a core of 3 and be like, well, I'm running Malphite because I have Rebel. I'm running Blitzcrank and Ezreal and I have Chrono. I have these 2 slots open left in my comp. Let's just run Vi and Gnar to get the 4 Brawler frontline. I think this is going to change in the next set because I don't think there's as many devastating ults in the game. So having these health bonuses... Oh, and Nunu. Nunu's ult works off HP. So having higher health on Nunu makes his ult better. So I do think Brawler will see more play next set, outside of just being played with blasters because you had a Malphite and an Ezreal. Demo, we're never going to see Demo again. It's clear. We're never going to see Demo again. Demo was horrible, especially preset 3.5. like OG set 3, having the demo spat, that was horrible. It was legitimately horrible to play against. So I don't think we are ever going to see a trait like this again with stuns. Stuns will be inherent to spells, I assume. It will not be inherent to a trait. So that way we avoid having situations like that again. I've said my piece about GP, so I'm not going to repeat myself. Ziggs was fine, though. Ziggs was a nice early game Gary to run with. And then you could throw in Rumble, who was kind of a useless unit, to get the demo perk. But overall, I don't think we're going to see demo again. Infiltrator, a backline jumper. I'm glad they changed Infiltrator so that the refresh on trait down, you no longer had to have 4, because running 4 Infiltrator is basically only been done with one comp ever in this game. That was with Mech Infiltrator pre 3.5. Like that wasn't even that was pre 3.5. So it became much more common to like just play 2 or use an Infiltrator spat to get these bonus attack speed. So I think Infiltrator worked out well. I think the other things I'll add, Nocturne ended up actually being a pretty good early game champion for Infiltrator, because he'd basically lock something down and kill it. It was that simple. Zed was a really nice design to replace Sonya, because his ability is really fun. He kind of like Nocturne will lock down a champion, making them very weak, and he basically will 1v1 him. And he was also fun because a Blademaster spat just made him ridiculous. Shaco as a carry. Here's the thing with Shaco. A lot of people, as the game kind of moved on, got tired of Shaco. People got tired of Shaco because Shaco was a pestilence. He was very difficult to kill. These champions that had tumble-like effects, like Vayne, like, who's the other one? I forget. But Vayne's really the only other one that's pretty relevant here. That would just kind of would de-aggro on their own, became an annoyance because they were really hard to take down. Nothing just focused them. So people got really annoyed with this. He was also kind of busted with the original IE, which made so for people who don't know, current IE makes it so that you always crit and do, I think it's like a bonus 20 or 30% damage. The way it used to be was your crits did 100% more damage and happened another like 25-30% of the time. So his ult was a crit. That blew things up. Kazakh Set 2 did the same thing. Because their ult was a crit with old IE, they blew shit up. With Set 3.5, this was a little more balanced because of the IE rework. Unfortunately, IE is not that great anymore because of that rework. But Shaco was always still a good carry to run. And you could kind of hold him throughout the game. And he fit into a whole load of comps that you could play with. Fizz's ult was really good. Echo. So here's my thing with Echo. Echo 1 was probably one of the worst champions at 5 cost. He's really bad. He hits for minimal damage, minimal times, and you're kind of like, why did I run this? But when you got him to 2-star, he suddenly did a ton of damage. Not only did he do a ton of damage, he also, because of the rework where he targeted things with highest attack speed, if you put a QSS on something, he snapped their necks. Their necks were snapped. This was a problem with Jinx. It's why you stop. It used to be pretty common to put a QSS on Jinx, so that way she wouldn't get stunned and would keep her get excited, get up the rockets, pew pew pew, everything died. You couldn't do that anymore, because when you put a QSS on her and her get excited raised her attack speed, Echo just neck snap, instant kill. Nothing you could do about it, and there goes your carry. So Echo was kind of like all over the place, where if you gave him the right items, like a Sojourns, he was busted and just like would just all the time blow out the entire field. Whereas if you had him at 1-star, he was useless. I kind of wish they reworked him a little bit differently, but he was okay where he was, I guess. I think the biggest issue, then the biggest explanation for why we didn't see as much Echo, Fizz was pretty much better. It was almost always better just to play Fizz. Mana Reaver. I remember when Mana Reaver came out in set 3, and you had to have all 4 champions to trigger Mana Reaver, and I just kind of stared at him like, who would run these 4 champions in a comp? This makes no sense at all. So they cut it down to 2, and they got rid of one of the champions and Kassadin later, because Kassadin was causing all sorts of problems. Really, you only saw Mana Reaver in Space Pirates, where you already had Darius, and you added either Aurelia or Thresh, or you were playing Cyber, and where you had Aurelia, and you just added in Thresh. Mana Reaver, though, is a fine trait. It's a counter trait. It was one of the few ways to really contest a handful of builds that were problematic, because if their champion ulted, you usually lost. So I was actually pretty fine with Mana Reaver where it ended up. Mercenary, not much to talk about when there's only one, and I've said my piece about GP. Kind of another thing to add, Mercenary. I think Mercenary was not a good trait. It meant in order to run that champion, you had to invest a lot of gold into that single champion. And it kind of went into that huge power spike that I was talking about with Space Pirates. I think Mercenary kind of played into that, where you just high rolled and you just won more, and like no one ever caught up to you. Mystic's a flex trait. It was fine. Soraka was secret OP. Not much else I can say. Soraka was secret OP. Paragon. I had so many. Janna was another champion I had a lot of issues with. So my issues with Janna were twofold. One was, it was basically the Paragon trait in her ult, or what I had problems with. I think she ulted a bit too much, and it was a like massive AoE stun. I wasn't really fine with that, especially with how often she ulted. I think having mass AoE stuns that happen a lot is not great to watch in this game. It's not very fun. It's not very fun to do. It's not very fun to watch. Not overly pleased with it. On top of that, the Paragon trait made it so Star Guardians kind of blew people out. Between the increased attack speed and the true damage on all the spell, it was kind of a mess to deal with. Paragon made it so that everyone needed to run Mystics late game in order to survive either the physical damage or you just die to the true damage. Protector. I don't think we're going to see Protector again either. I think Protector is another trait that kind of became problematic. Generating a shield on your ult along with performing your ult became kind of problematic on a handful of champions. The most particular one was probably Nico, because Nico was an AoE stun. So she would AoE stun, attack, build up that mana again, and then with a shield, and then AoE stun again. I think it was problematic. I think also these numbers kind of got out of control after a while. I think 2 should have been less. I think this should probably have been 35, and this probably should have been 20. But that's just kind of my thought. It would also help reduce like the absurdity that was that Jarvan buff. I think everyone kind of saw that I think a lot of people saw that Jarvan buff and was like, "Is this good?" I'm pretty sure I saw it and went like, "Wow, these are a lot of buffs." Play your Protector Celestial openers, and people did. And they crushed people, because Jarvan was borked. What's interesting about Protector was that Jin Zhao was probably designed in mind to be the carry in Protectors. Like, Protectors was a comp that I think they thought was a build that you could just run on its own and be a carry without having, like, an actual front line. Like, your front lines were your carry in that case. And I think they thought Jin Zhao was going to be the carry there. And he just didn't end up because they kept buffing up Jarvan. Because Jarvan was actually really bad. Protector and Jarvan in general were kind of really bad preset 3.5. And then it just kind of blew up when they started buffing everything. Urgot, so I'm only going to say this once. I only had one problem with Urgot, and that was him eating GAs. Otherwise, I had no problem with Urgot. Especially when the game was getting to a point where champions were unkillable, so you needed something that could kill them. Ta-da, Urgot. So I know a lot of people took issues with Urgot and what Urgot did in the game. I didn't have that issue. I thought it was fine. Outside of eating GA, I thought that was over the top. There was no reason for him to have to eat GAs. Sniper. I think outside of when Sniper was a little bit overpowered in general, all the snipers kind of, I think, hit a fine spot. In terms of where they fit in various compositions. You saw Sniper 2, you saw Sniper 4. Pretty much all of these are carries in different compositions. Like, all 5 of these can be a carry. So, they really did actually hit the mark on Sniper. Caitlyn usually served as the flex that you'd play because she had Chrono Trait, and Chrono Trait was good. Ashe had weird builds late in the game that stunned everything all the time and was Celestial. So when combined with Jhin, could get a shitload of health if you had multiple Celestials. Vayne was the Cybernetics carry. Jhin murdered things. Like, there's no other way to describe Jhin. Jhin just murdered things. And Teemu did Teemu things. I think the only one of these that I kind of had an issue with was Teemu. Teemu's kind of like GP in that you have to invest a lot of resources for him to become really good. In that he needs his items, he needs his champions, or else he's really bad. You can't like flex his champions. You need the 3 Astros. You need another sniper. He needs blue buff. He needs either Morello, Ludens. He needs another spell, another rod item, in order to be useful. So I'd like to see champions that don't require that much investment to be useful. I would have liked it if his mines were just a useful ability that you could have in a composition, not where you had to put all of these items onto him to make him good. Sorcerer, it's hard to judge Sorcerer because Sorcerer and Star Guardian's kind of the same thing in this set. You were always running Sorks with Star Guardians. There's not much else to really say here. The addition of Victor, though, is worth noting because Victor, we didn't really have a good AoE Sork. Most of these are single target. We didn't have like an AoE carry. Most of these are like single target till you like alt Xerath or in the early game when you have Ahri. You didn't like have that late game AoE death crunch. Adding in Victor provided that. Another bonus I want to say about Victor, Giant Slayer. The rework to Giant Slayer to be damage on top of your baseline damage made Giant Slayer useful everywhere. So that was a really good change because it was really good on Victor. it kind of made things die with Victor. I usually put it on him above Death Cap because I could carry a Giant Slayer in the early game to put on him in the late game. Whereas Death Cap, that's not always true. Starship, Asol. Asol's Asol. A lot of the changes they made to him later in the game were very good, especially the delay on his cast. The delay on his cast was probably the best change they made to him because he was kind of busted when he had a Protector Spat. Because he couldn't be CC'd, there's nothing you could do with a Protector Spat. He just had a Protector Spat and didn't die, and it was annoying. Vanguard, nothing special about Vanguard. Wukong is probably one of the... There actually are a few we're talking about. Poppy in the... Remember Candyland? Anyone remember Candyland? There is an issue with shields in this game, where shielding yourself is really annoying to other players, especially if other players don't have DPS to kill things. I don't think that's going to go away, but it was an issue with Poppy because when she had Death Cap, that shield amount got really high. The same thing with Mordekaiser, except the thing with Mordekaiser is actually still true and scales with Darkstar. So if you've ever seen a Mordekaiser carry, it's really funny. It's really funny. Nautilus, he's the same as before. Jace did a ton of damage, but Wukong Wukong was an annoying stun because he just hit your entire board with a 2-second stun. Wukong might be the best frontliner in the game right now, outside of Mech, because lol Mech. Just because he kind of runs through and stuns everything. It made him like a destroyer of Jinx. So I'm curious if we're going to see something like Wukong again, that just kind of flies all over the battlefield, stunning him. Same thing with V. She kind of did the same thing. Origins, we've already talked about all of these. So overall, my end feelings on set 3, and particularly set 3.5. I'm going to be honest, I kind of liked set 2 a little bit more, in that I felt like there was a lot more opener. The opener was a lot more standardized in set 2, which probably means set 3 was a little bit better for that, but I always felt like I knew what I was doing in the opener of set 2. Whereas in set 3, I was always kind of like all over the place on my opener. Now, that's probably a combination of the lack of econ and the more variety of openers that set 3 overall had. I think the biggest concern I had was when you like low rolled an opener. Low rolling an opener was kind of got brutal in set 3, especially at like the tier I'm in with like Plat Diamond. People who low roll openers have trouble saving that game, whereas pros, that's where pros make their living, saving low roll openers. Whereas in Plat Diamond, if you high roll, like, you're just gonna win. Like, once you get above gold, like, if you high roll an opener, you should win. Pros, it's a little bit differently because they can transition. They usually transition really effectively. But the opener of the game right now, it just feels off to me. I don't know if that's going to change in set 4 because I haven't played any of the PvE. But I'm hoping we get a little more interesting openers and a little more consistency in the openers. Because right now it just feels like a free-for-all in just like what you can get and what you can play. But I did like set 3. I think I liked pre 3.5 more than I liked 3.5. For 2 reasons. One, Void was, I think, a pretty interesting composition to play. And 2, Kale. Everything goes with Kale. Kale was basically run 2 other Blademasters and a composition and be happy. And you didn't really get that with any other composition in the game. But 3.5 wasn't bad. The addition of Astro was pretty unique, but the fact that it really only resulted in 1 composition being added was a little rough. Battle Cash just didn't work out. It made the early game a little bit more interesting, but didn't really change how the game played, in my opinion. But it wasn't too bad. I'm not overly upset about it. So I think that's it for this video. That's kind of my thoughts on 3 and 3.5. I like 2 a bit more, but this wasn't bad. I enjoyed it. Anyway, that's it. I'm out. Peace.